Hello and welcome to Part 2 of BADM323 Chapter 8 discussion covering securing information systems. It is not surprising to learn that most computer crime against companies is committed by current or former employees. They know the system best, are entrusted with huge amounts of data, and have the easiest access. Managers and executives need to be aware of potential internal threats to their systems and put special measures in place to safeguard systems and data. They also need to impress upon all employees how important security is throughout the system, right down to the last person. Jesse William McGraw worked as a night security guard at Northern Central Medical Plaza in Dallas, where he essentially had free run of the building. While working, McGraw gained physical access to more than 10 of the hospital's computers, including those located in a nurse's station, and controlling the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, or also the HVAC. He enabled the computers to be accessed remotely and removed certain security features, for example, by uninstalling antivirus programs, which made the entire network more vulnerable to attack. McGraw also installed malicious codes, or bots, on several computers. In March of 2011, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison for installing malware on facility computers. A former computer programmer at Goldman Sachs and Company was sentenced in March 2011 to 97 months in prison for theft of trade secrets and interstate transportation of stolen property. For just over 2 years, Sergei Alikhanov was employed at Goldman Sachs as a computer programmer, responsible for developing computer programs supporting the firm's high-frequency trading on various commodities and equities markets. Shortly after 5 p.m. on his last day of employment, Alikhanov transferred substantial portions of the Goldman Sachs proprietary computer code for its trading platform to an outside computer server in Germany. He encrypted the files and transferred them over the internet without informing Goldman Sachs. During the sentencing proceeding, U.S. District Court Judge Denise Alcott said Alkhanov's conduct deserved a significant sentence because the scope of his theft was audacious, motivated solely by greed, and it was characterized by supreme disloyalty to his employer. A federal jury convicted a former Dow Chemical Company employee of stealing trade secrets and selling them to companies in China, as well as committing perjury. According to the evidence presented in the court in early 2011, Wen-Chu Liu, also known as David Liu, came to the United States from China for graduate work. He began working for Dow in 1965 and retired in 1992. Liu traveled throughout China to market the stolen information, and court evidence showed that he paid current and former Dow employees for material and information. In one instance, Liu bribed a then employee with $50,000 in cash to provide Dow's process manual and other CPE-related information. Password theft is the easiest way for hackers to gain access to a system. No, they don't come into your office at night and look at the piece of paper on your desk drawer that has your password written on it. They generally use specifically written software programs that can build various passwords to see if any of them will work. That is why you should use old or odd combinations of letters and numbers not easily associated with your name to create your password. The longer the password, the harder it is to replicate. The same password should not be used for more than one access point. Using multiple passwords limits the damage done if a hacker does manage to obtain a single password. Safeguarding individual passwords from social engineering, maliciousness is the responsibility of everyone in the organization. An effective way of limiting access to data is to establish computer-generated logs that show every employee who logged on, what they did, what part of the system they accessed, and whether any data were used or updated. Logs are easily created by system software programs and should be periodically reviewed by the information technology staff and department managers. If nothing else, it gives them an idea of what their employees are doing. You too can be a millionaire. On the ABC television show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, one contestant won a top prize of $1 million by knowing what insect represented the computer bug. The term bug, used to describe a defect in a software program, has been around since 1940s and 50s. And back then, computers were powered by vacuum tubes, hundreds and thousands of them. Grace Hopper, an early computer pioneer, was troubleshooting a computer that had quit running. When her team opened the back of the computer to see what was wrong, they found a moth had landed on one of the tubes and burnt it out. She coined the term bug to describe a problem with computers. With millions of lines of code, it's impossible to have a completely error-free program. Most software manufacturers know the products contain bugs when they release them to the marketplace. They provide free updates, or patches, and fixes on the websites. That is why it is a good idea not to buy the original version of a new software program, but to wait until some of the major bugs have been found and corrected. Because bugs are so easy to create, most unintentionally, you can reduce the number of them in your programs by using the tools discussed in other chapters of the Loudon text to design good programs. Many bugs originate in poorly defined and designed programs and keep infiltrating all parts of the program. The bottom line, information system security is everyone's business. Understanding the vulnerabilities present in hardware, software, data, and networks is the first step to good security. The "it won't happen to me" attitude is trouble. Instituting measures to decrease the bugs and defects in software and data entry can solve many system quality problems. Transactions worth billions and trillions of dollars are carried out on networks every day. Think of the impact if the network experiences downtime for even a few minutes, and the problem is far worse than companies may reveal. According to a discussion with James Andrew Lewis, Center for Strategic and International Studies in March of 2010, he said there is evidence that unknown foreign entities have probed the computer networks of the power grid. Some electrical companies report thousands of probes every month, although we do not know, and it may not make much of a difference, whether these were cyber crimes as part of a military reconnaissance effort. There is also anecdotal reporting that potential military opponents have done the reconnaissance necessary for a cyber attack on the power grid, mapping the underlying network infrastructure and locating potential vulnerabilities. Military precedent, foreign military publications, and new vulnerabilities combine to suggest that foreign opponents have added cyber attack on the power grid to their portfolio of possible actions in a conflict with the United States. Perhaps a better way to express this is that the United States cannot safely assume that it is not vulnerable to cyber attacks on its electrical grid, and should consider how it might improve its ability to defend these networks. In 2005, ChoicePoint, a data brokerage company, revealed that they had inadvertently sold personal and financial information to more than 50 companies that were fronts for identity thieves. This incident underscores the difficulties with protecting data and information on millions of unsuspecting consumers and legitimate businesses. The cost of settling several lawsuits went far beyond the potential profits ChoicePoint probably made. Indeed, the problem has been very damaging to ChoicePoint's business reputation. Consumer data broker ChoicePoint, which last year acknowledged that the personal financial records of more than 163,000 consumers in its database have been compromised, will pay $10 million in civil penalties and $5 million in consumer redress to settle Federal Trade Commission charges that its security and record handling procedures violated consumers' privacy rights and federal laws. The settlement requires ChoicePoint to implement new procedures to ensure that it provides consumer reports only to legitimate businesses for lawful purposes, to establish and maintain comprehensive information security program, and to obtain audits by an independent third-party security professional every year, make that every other year until 2026. The message to ChoicePoint and others should be clear. Consumers' private data must be protected from thieves. Data security is critical to consumers, and protecting it is a priority for the FTC, and it should be every business in America. If a business does not adequately protect its systems for any other reason, it should just protect it to avoid expensive and time-consuming legal action. The national retailer TJ Maxx was forced to spend about $200 million in litigation and damage costs after experiencing a serious security breach in 2008. The money could certainly have been put to better use. Because so much of our personal and financial information is now maintained electronically, the U.S. government is beginning to pass laws mandating how the data will be protected from unauthorized or illegal misuse. Congress has passed several measures outlining the requirements for electrical records management. These include HIPAA, which protects medical and healthcare data. The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act requires financial institutions to ensure security and confidentiality of customer data. And the Sarbanes-Oxley Act requires companies and their management to safeguard the accuracy and integrity of financial information that is used internally and released externally. All of these laws are in response to computer crimes and abuses that businesses or individuals have committed or experienced. It is very difficult to pass the laws and costly for businesses who struggle to comply with them. Several things are happening in the corporate world that are changing the requirements for how companies handle their electronic documents. One is, companies are now communicating more and more with email and other forms of electronic transmissions. And two, courts are allowing all forms of communication to be held as evidence. Therefore, businesses must develop methods of capturing, storing, and presenting data, and all electronic communications, including email, instant messaging, and e-commerce transactions. When we look at computer forensics, this is a growing field because of the increasing digitization of documents and communications. Many people believe that just because you delete a file from a computer file directory that it is no longer available or recoverable. That's a false belief. Ambient data remains on hard drives in magnetic form long after it's apparently been deleted. People trained in computer forensics are now able to uncover ambient data and other forms of electronic evidence that can be used in courts of law. Businesses and employees must increase their awareness of the necessity for keeping good records. So the bottom line, regardless of where and how electronic transmissions were generated or received, businesses are now responsible for making sure they are monitored, stored, and available for scrutiny. These new requirements significantly change the way businesses view the information resources. So how do you help prevent some of the problems we've discussed? One of the best ways is to institute controls into your information system, the same way you might in any other system, through methods, policies, and procedures. Information system controls. Think about what a typical company does when it builds a new office building. From the beginning of the design phase until the building is occupied, the company decides how the physical security of the building and its occupants will be handled. It builds locks into the doors, maybe even designs a single entry control point. It builds a special wing for executive offices that has extra thick bulletproof glass. There are fences around the perimeter of the building that control the loading docks. These are just a few examples to get you to think about the fact that the company designs the security into the building from the beginning. It doesn't wait until everything is built. You should do the same with the information system. It's no different from any other system that requires planning, as well as thought out policies and procedures before the construction begins. So there are two types of information system controls. There's general controls. This is the software, physical hardware, computer operations, data security, implementation process, and administrative. And then there's the application control, which contains input, processing, and output. This slide examines the second type of information system controls, application controls. There are specific input controls for input, authorization, data conversion, data editing, and error handling. Processing controls establish that data are complete and accurate during updating. Output controls ensure that the results of computer processing are accurate, complete, and properly distributed. This slide looks at another important factor in establishing an appropriate framework for security and control, risk management. Although not all risks can be anticipated and measured, most businesses should be able to identify many of the risks they face. The table illustrates sample results of a risk assessment for an online order processing system that processes 30,000 orders per day. The likelihood of each exposure occurring over a 1-year period is expressed as a percentage, the expected annual loss, and the result of multiplying the probability by the average loss. Companies and government systems constantly use risk assessment to determine weak links in their physical building security. You can use the same methodology to assess the risk in your information system. Use risk assessment to set up cost comparisons for developing and maintaining security against loss potential. It's done all the time in other systems, so use it in your information systems as well. Companies spend a lot of money on physical security, such as locks and doors or fences around supply depots. They need to do the same thing for their information systems. Because of the increasing liability for security breaches, many companies are now establishing a chief security officer position to help ensure the firm maximizes the protection of information resources. Some tools available to the CSO are a security policy, which is a principal document that determines security goals and how they will be achieved. The acceptable use policy. It outlines acceptable and unacceptable use of hardware and telecommunications equipment. It also specifies consequences for the non-compliance. And then there's the identity management system, which manages access to each part of the information system. Identity management is one of the most important principles of a strong, viable security policy. It includes the business processes and software tools for identifying a valid system, the controlling of access to system resources, policies for identifying and authorizing different categories of system users, specifying what systems or portions of the system each user is allowed to access, and processes and technologies for authenticating users and protecting their identities. This graphic illustrates the security allowed for two sets of users of a personnel database that contains sensitive information such as employees' salaries and medical histories. One set of users consists of all employees who perform clerical functions, such as inputting employee data into the system. All individuals with this type of profile can update the system, but can neither read nor update sensitive fields such as salary, medical history, or earnings data. Another profile applies to a divisional manager who cannot update the system but who can read all employee data for his or her division, including medical history and salary. These security profiles are based on access rules supplied by the business groups in the firm. Floods, fires, hurricanes, even tsunamis happen without a moment's notice. Perhaps the most important element of a successful system is a disaster recovery plan. Some firms, not just in New York City and Washington, D.C., but around the world, discovered the necessity for a well-written and tested plan on September 11, 2001. Those firms that had completed business continuity planning were able to carry on business, while those who hadn't spent days and weeks recovering from the terrorist attacks. It is important that managers and employees work with information system technologies to develop these plans. Too much is at stake to leave the planning process to one group or another. Companies audit their financial data using outside firms to make sure there are not any discrepancies in their accounting processes. Perhaps they audit their supply systems on a periodic basis to make sure everything is on the up and up. They should also audit their information systems. After all, information is as an important resource as any other in the organization. MIS audits verify that the system was developed according to specifications, that the input, processing, and output systems are operating according to the requirements, and that the data is protected against theft, abuse, and misuse. In a sense, an MIS audit checks all the controls we've discussed in this chapter. The bottom line, general and application controls help protect information systems. Risk assessments help determine which assets require protection and how much protection they need. Business continuity and disaster recovery planning are more important than ever for businesses. This graphic illustrates a sample page from an auditor's listing of control weaknesses for a loan system. It includes a section for notifying management of such weaknesses and for management's response. Management is expected to devise a plan for countering significant weaknesses in control. Let's look at some ways that a firm can help protect itself. Identity management and authentication. Continuous headlines telling of hackers' exploits in the past year should be enough to convince every company of the need to install firewalls, identity management systems, and other security measures. With the installation of cable modems or DSL lines, home users must follow some guidelines. These new connections, which leave your personal computer always on, are just as vulnerable to attacks as corporate systems. If you allow employees to keep certain data on their machines that are not backed up to the mainframe computer, you need to ensure that safeguards are installed on the individual PC. Make sure you have controls in place for access to individual data, backing it up, and properly protecting it against corruption. Do you even have a policy about whether employees can store data on their individual terminals? In corporate systems, it is important to ensure authentication methods are in place so that unauthorized users cannot access the system or its data. Access can be granted in one of three ways: something you know, passwords; something you have, tokens or smart cards; and something you are, biometric authentication. Because most simple password systems are too weak and make the system too vulnerable, security experts are devising new methods to control access. Tokens and smart cards are small, physical devices individuals use to securely access information systems. Biometric authentication is becoming more popular as a method to protecting systems and data as the technology is refined. While you may have seen your fingerprints or facial recognition techniques only on sci-fi movies, rest assured it may be the next wave of security that's installed in your organization. The four types of firewall described in the text are: packet filtering. This is where data packet header information is examined in isolation. There's a stateful inspection. The actual message comes through the firewall but must be identified by the user as passable. And network address translation, also known as NAT. It conceals IP addresses and makes it more difficult to penetrate systems. And then the application proxy filter, sort of like a fence through which a substitute message passes. This graphic illustrates the use of firewalls on a corporate network. Notice here, a second inner firewall protects the web server from access through the internet network. Firewalls can deter, but not completely prevent network penetration from outsiders, and should be viewed as one element in an overall security plan. In addition to firewalls, digital firms relying on networks use intrusion detection systems to help them protect their systems. In March of 2002, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio reported over 250,000 unauthorized attempted entries into its computer systems by hackers in a 24-hour period. The intrusion detection system it had in place allowed authorities to track the hacker attempts and thwart damage to its critical data and systems. And there's antivirus and anti-spyware software. Whether you use a standalone PC or your computer is attached to a network, you're just asking for trouble if you do not have antivirus software. This type of software checks every incoming file for viruses, not if, but when you receive an infected file. The software alerts you to its presence and usually quarantines it until you decide what to do with it. You can choose to delete the file or clean it. Make sure you update your antivirus software at least once a week because new viruses are constantly being written and passed around. Some antivirus software companies now make it very easy to keep your antivirus software current through an online update. McAfee.com will detect when you are online and notify you when updates are available. With a few mouse clicks, you download the software to protect against the newest viruses. Looking at a unified threat management systems. It's a daunting task to individually manage all the security tools available to a business. Unified threat management technologies help organizations by providing all of them in one comprehensive package. It's a great way for small and medium-sized organizations to ensure they cover all the security vulnerabilities in their system. It is important for Wi-Fi users to protect their data and electronic transmissions as wireless networks and their access points proliferate around the country. Security is easily penetrated because of the very nature of the spectrum transmission used in Wi-Fi. Unless users take stringent precautions to protect their computers, it is relatively easy for hackers to obtain access to files. Stronger encryption and authentication systems for Wi-Fi than the original wired equivalent privacy or WEP are included in new computer models. Wi-Fi Protected Access, or WPA, improves security on wireless networks, but individual users still carry the responsibility to make sure passwords are changed from the original and encryption systems are used to help protect data. Before he ran for president, Barack Obama quit smoking, and now that he won the job, he had to break another addiction, checking his BlackBerry or his email. The president's email can be subpoenaed by Congress and courts and may be subject to public record laws. So if a president does not want his email public, he shouldn't email, experts say, and there may be security issues about carrying around trackable cell phones. Most people are reluctant to buy and sell on the internet because they're afraid of theft. fraud, and interception of transactions. To help ease the mind and make transactions secure, many companies are using very sophisticated methods of protecting data as they travel across the various transmission mediums through the use of encryption. The standard method of making online transactions more secure are secure socket layers, Transport Layer Security, or TLS, and Secure Hypertext Transport Protocol. The next time you're on an e-commerce or e-business website, look at the address text in your browser and notice if the address begins with an HTTPS. If so, the site incorporates one of these two security measures. This slide discusses the use of encryption to ensure that data traveling along networks cannot be read by unauthorized users. Public key encryption uses two keys, one shared or public, and one totally private. The keys are mathematically related so that data encryption with one key can be decrypted using only the other key. To send and receive messages, communicators first create separate pairs of private and public keys. The public key is kept in a directory, and the private key must be kept secret. The sender encrypts a message with the recipient's public key. On receiving the message, the recipient uses his or her private key to decrypt it. Note that the strength of the encryption key is measured by its bit length. Today, a typical key will be about 128 bits long, a string of about 128 binary digits. Watch any World War II movie and you will see episodes of the good guys intercepting coded messages from the enemy. The messages were scrambled and almost impossible to interpret, but the good guys always won out in the end and unscrambled the message in time to save the world. Now we use sophisticated spyware or software programs to encrypt or scramble transmissions before they are sent. The sender and recipient have special software programs they can use to encode and decode the transaction on each end. So this figure shows you how the public key encryption works using two keys, one public and one private. The keys are created through complicated mathematical formulas. The longer the key, the harder it is to decipher. That's the whole point of encryption. Encryption software programs incorporate authentication and message integrity in its program to ensure senders and receivers are protected against many of the computer crimes committed on networks and the internet. So another way of providing authenticity to network transmission is by using a digital certificate. Just as your personal signature is connected to you, a digital certificate provides a way of proving you are who you say you are. GlobalSign.com has lots of information about its digital certificate product and other useful information about this technology. You can get a demo certificate, find someone's certificate, or get more information about how to use your own certificate. So public key infrastructure, or PKI, is another method for providing secure authentication of online identity and makes users more comfortable transacting business over networks. This graphic illustrates the process for using digital certificates. The institution or individual requests a certificate over the internet from a CA. The certificate received from the CA can then be used to validate a transaction with an online merchant or customer. Many companies create fault-tolerant computer systems that are used as backups to help keep operations running in the main system if the main system should go out. These backup systems add to the overall cost of the system. But think about the losses if the system experiences a significant period of downtime. Add the cost of lost productivity by employees to lost transactions and unhappy customers. You do the math. Just imagine what would happen if an airline reservation system, a typical online transaction processing system, went down. Have you ever called a company to place an order for a new dress or suit, but it couldn't take your order because the computer was down? Maybe you called back later, and maybe you didn't. Make sure you understand the difference between fault-tolerant computer systems and high-availability computing. Fault-tolerant computer systems promise continuous availability and eliminate recovery time altogether. High-availability computer systems help firms recover quickly from a crash. So high-availability computer systems use the following tools to ensure digital firms have a continuous computing capacity available. They use load balancing, redundant servers, mirroring, clustering, and storage area networks. As systems become more sophisticated and able to self-diagnose problems, recovery-oriented computing will go a long way toward helping businesses get back up and running more quickly and easily. Controlling network traffic, deep packet inspection. Network data traffic takes many different forms, from simple text file transfers to massive audio and video file transmission. Obviously, the small text files take up less bandwidth and can be transmitted faster than larger files. Deep packet inspection technologies help identify which types of files are being transferred and delay those that hog the network. It makes sense to a point, except when the technology is misused or abused. In the net neutrality debate, internet service providers like AT&T and Verizon have said they need to change content providers for prioritization so they can invest in improving infrastructure. Faster internet service for all, they say. By placing a price on prioritizing content, it creates an internet disincentive to expand infrastructure. ISPs would profit from a congested internet in which some content providers will be more than willing to pay the additional fees for faster delivery to users. Content providers like the New York Times and Google would have little choice but to fork it over to get their information to the end users. But end users would be unlikely to see the promised upgrades in speed. Those are some of the results of research we conducted in the internet market. Despite the fierce back and forth of net neutrality, there is a surprising lack of rigorous economic analysis on the topic. To change that, we built a game-theoretic economic model to address this question. Do ISPs have more incentive to expand their infrastructure capacity when net neutrality is abolished? This is a key claim used widely by ISP companies in arguing against maintaining a net neutrality internet. The money from fees levied on content providers, they say, would be incentive to improve and expand infrastructure. In this argument, web surfers gain access to a faster internet. But analysis shows that if net neutrality were abolished, ISPs actually have less incentive to expand infrastructure. So security outsourcing. If your company lacks the internal resources to adequately plan for disaster, you can use an outside source such as managed security service providers. They may be better at the necessary planning and offering appropriate hardware and software resources because they specialize in such things. If your company lacks the internal resources to adequately plan for disaster, you can use an outside source such as managed security service providers. The concept of cloud computing sounds like nirvana to many companies. Someone else takes on the responsibility of building and maintaining very expensive information systems. Someone else spends the money and time to ensure the systems are up to date and use the latest technology. You only pay for what you use. Sounds great until you consider the flip side of the coin. Just how secure is your data stored in the cloud? Regardless of where your company stores its data, performs data processing, or how it transmits data to and from your company, is ultimately the only one who is responsible for security. Even if a cloud provider has every security certification in the book, that's no guarantee your specific servers, apps, and networks are secure. When it comes to, say, compliance of the credit card industry's PCI DSS, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, a retailer or credit card processor is audited on how well their servers and applications are deployed on the platform provided by the cloud vendor, such as Amazon or Google. If you set up your applications badly, it does not matter how secure the platform you're running on is. So securing Siemens' cloud environment required looking at IT from the outside in and securing every conceivable path by which a user could access critical information. Securing each platform was not a significant challenge, but ensuring all the needed security technologies work together was. Hackers do not discriminate when it comes to targeting computing devices. They will go after your unprotected smartphone just as gladly as they will your desktop or laptop computer. Do not leave yourself an easy target. As internet telephony and mobile computing handle more and more data, they will become more frequent targets of cybercrime. From the outset, VoIP infrastructure has been vulnerable to the same types of attacks that plague other networked computing architectures. When voice is digitized, encoded, compressed into packets, and exchanged over IP networks, it is susceptible to misuse. Cyber criminals will be drawn to the VoIP medium to engage in voice fraud, data theft, and other scams, similar to the problems email has experienced. Denial of service, remote code execution, and botnets will apply to VoIP networks and will become more problematic for mobile devices as well. So Patrick Traynor, an assistant professor at the School of Computer Science at Georgia Tech and a member of the GTISC, discussed the concept of the digital wallet, in which smartphones store personal identity, payment card information, and more. Already in Japan, people use their cell phones at vending machines and subway token dispensers. So according to Traynor, will be injected onto cell phones and turn them into bots. Large cellular botnets could then be used to perpetrate a DOS attack against the core of cellular network. But because the mobile communications field is evolving so quickly, it presents a unique opportunity to design security properly, an opportunity we missed with the PC. There are two methods to help improve software programs and ensure better quality of them. The first one, software metrics, allows IS departments and users to measure the system's performance and identify problems as they occur. You could measure the number of transactions that are processed in a given amount of time, or measure a company's online response time. As with any type of metric, software metrics must be carefully designed, formal, objective, and used consistently. Testing software for bugs and the inevitable errors is so important and yet is so often overlooked. The two best methods of testing are walkthroughs and debugging. Walkthroughs are done before the software is even written. Obviously, debugging is done after the software is written and when errors are found. So the bottom line, some of the technologies and tools businesses use for security and control include access control, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, antivirus software, and encryption. The tools available for ensuring business continuity include fault-tolerant systems and high-availability computing. Security is everyone's concern throughout the organization. So thank you again for watching another video episode for Chapter 8 for BADM323. As I always say, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me or post a question in the discussion forum. Thank you very much for your time.